While it's been a divisive little year, 2023 has arguably offered up some of the better video game experiences we've seen in recent years, at least within a 12-month period. But it's also fair to say the developers of this year's most overlooked games might not agree, because as great as rave reviews are, they also need the sales data to back it up. Now, while we certainly can't confirm how most of these games have sold, and some handily are available on Xbox Game Pass, it's clear that none of them have made quite the tectonic impact with players they absolutely should have. From card-carrying indies to an egregiously slept-on AAA masterpiece, you can't go wrong with any of these unsung games in the last 12 or so months. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are the 10 most overlooked video games of 2023. Number 10, Viewfinder. Let's kick things off with one of the most ingeniously premised video games ever. The brain-breakingly brilliant puzzler Viewfinder gives players a camera and allows them to take Polaroid photographs of the environment, which can then be placed in the very same 3D space, creating pathways towards the teleport pod in each level. If the influence from Valve's Portal is obvious, Viewfinder is nevertheless a challenging and innovative puzzle game all of its own, forcing the player to consider perspective and scale in order to progress to the next stage. As with any great puzzler, it also keeps finding clever ways to up the ante, forcing you to jump through a whole bunch of hoops and mental gymnastics to make sure you can keep up with it all the way to the creative end. Though those craving a nuanced story should certainly look elsewhere, Viewfinder's first-rate mechanics are so brilliantly befuddling, you'll surely not care about the threadbare narrative. Number 9, Cocoon. Viewfinder is far from the only mind-bendingly impressive puzzle game to be released this year. There's also the mesmerizing Cocoon. The brainchild of director Jep Carlson, the lead gameplay designer of indie masterworks Limbo and Inside, Cocoon pits players as a beetle-like insect as they traverse a barren wasteland and harness unique abilities using a series of orbs. Cocoon's primary mechanic involves swapping between the game's numerous colored orbs in order to visit its various hub-like worlds and keep progressing onwards. As the use case of each orb becomes more complex, players will find themselves nesting orbs within orbs in order to solve increasingly tricky puzzles, making for a supremely challenging but also tremendously rewarding experience. In addition to this, the atmosphere, wrought through an incredible soundtrack and some really intriguing visuals, is richer than almost anything else released this year. If you're in the market for a puzzler that's smart but not infuriatingly difficult, Cocoon is just the ticket. Number 8, Killer Frequency. Fans of 80s slasher flicks are basically duty-bound to play Killer Frequency, a horror adventure game in which players control a former celebrity DJ who's forced to become his sleepy town's emergency dispatcher when a serial killer, the Whistling Man, begins stalking the locals. Despite the genre it technically belongs to, Killer Frequency isn't a particularly challenging or stressful game. That's given you spend the overwhelming majority of it manning a DJ booth while the mayhem unfolds outside, and even the periodic puzzles aren't particularly noodle baking. But this loving neon-soaked pastiche is absolutely dripping with atmosphere from first minute to last, aided hugely by the outstanding voice acting from the ensemble cast. Expertly balancing genuine suspense with a bunch of wry humor, this game is an absolute must-play if you love a horror B-movie. And even if not, it's a damn creative, gorgeous ride all the same. Number 7, Planet of Lana. Fans of Abe's Odyssey are doing themselves a huge disservice if they sleep on Planet of Lana any longer. An exceptional sci-fi puzzler in which players control the titular teenage girl and her cat Mui as they traverse a planet invaded by malevolent alien machines. Breathtakingly cinematic by way of its first-rate art direction and wonderfully minimalist story, Wishfully Studios' game takes a familiar premise and makes it uncommonly memorable, courtesy of its singular aesthetics and easygoing gameplay. Despite the peril of its concept, there's no combat to speak of and only minimal stealth sections that you should get through with ease, so the focus here is definitely on puzzle solving and exploration. Though well reviewed by most outlets and rocking a very positive rating on Steam, there's been curiously little sustained chatter about this one since it launched in May, and it bafflingly nabbed not even a single nomination at the Game Awards. In a year overflowing with admittedly fantastic AAA experiences, but those that demand dozens if not hundreds of hours from you, this particular little gem is absolutely an oasis in the desert. Number 6, Venba. No single game on this list is nearly as chilled out as Venba, a delightful narrative-driven cooking sim of sorts, surely doing for South Indian cuisine what the Coffee Talk games did for caffeine. The game follows an Indian couple who moved to Toronto, Canada to start a new life. It chronicles their difficulties in adjusting to their new environment and the challenges it poses for themselves and their relationship. But at its heart, Venba is centered entirely around food, as players are tasked with cooking a variety of mouth-watering dishes, all while being deeply immersed in Tamil culture throughout. Bolstered by an eye-popping art style, heart-soaring musical score, and genuinely life-affirming joie de vivre, this is the rarest of games that'll actually make you want to get up, put the games away, and cook something for real. At just 90 minutes in length, this one is an incredibly slight, snappy experience, but one that will absolutely leave a deep impression on you. Number 5. Oxenfree II: Lust Signals. You'd be forgiven for failing to realize that a sequel to Night School Studios' cult classic mystery adventure game Oxenfree even came out this year, so head-scratchingly low profile was its release this past summer. But don't be fooled, Oxenfree II is another fantastic plunge into a David Lynch-style surreal experience, and if you did miss the first one, this one actually works as a standalone experience. Players control 30-something Riley after she returns to her hometown for a job, where her investigations into a series of strange radio anomalies in the area lead her on a wildly bewildering journey. Oxenfree II combines a thick sense of uneasy mood with winning banter between its two central characters, Riley and her co-worker Jacob, and a short but sweet narrative packed with unexpected twists and turns. Oxenfree II is a real treat for adventurous players, especially if you're happy with a game that doesn't leave you with everything spelled out, and even though it doesn't explain it, it certainly makes you feel it. Number 4. Alan Wake 2. It seems absurd to call a game as hugely hyped, rewarded, and rapturously received as Alan Wake 2 overlooked. But considering its launch window sales weren't exactly stellar, and it's already been heavily discounted less than a month after release, it's clear that not nearly enough people have played it yet. Granted, the long-awaited survival horror sequel absolutely did come out in a very crowded AAA corridor for games, but it's absolutely one of the boldest, most creative, and exciting games in the space that we've seen in a long time. If there were somehow any lingering doubts about Remedy's ability to deliver some of the most meticulously crafted epic entertainment in the gaming sphere, Alan Wake 2's entrancing story, near-peerless aesthetics, and ambitious attempts to move the medium forward prove it in spades. There are moments in this thing like nothing you've ever seen in a game before, but saying anything more than that would be criminal. For anyone in the market for a deep dish mystery thriller girded by incredible production values and relentless imagination, look no further. Number 3. Bomb Rush Cyberpunk. It's incredibly easy to take one look at Bomb Rush Cyberpunk and dismiss its aesthetic and skate-based gameplay as shamelessly imitating Dreamcast cult classic Jet Set Radio. Yet given the quality of the end product and the fact that nothing substantial has been done with the Jet Set Radio IP in over 20 years now, it's also easy to view this quite charitably as a glorious spiritual successor. Much like its inspiration, you and your gang skate around a futuristic metropolis, this time around New Amsterdam instead of Tokyo. Here you'll be spraying graffiti, controlling turf, taking on rival groups, and skirting clear of the cops. As won't surprise anyone who's played Jet Set Radio, the cel-shaded art style is sublime to behold while rocking a swish indie soundtrack, including contributions from Jet Set Radio's own original composer, Hideki Naganuma. Where the line between homage and ripoff lies will ultimately be for players to decide for themselves. Regardless, this one brings an absolute classic into the modern era with flawless style and energetic panache. Number 2. Jant. If you're craving an uber-relaxing puzzle platformer to cleanse the palate amid the avalanche of AAA epics released this year, you couldn't do much better than Jant. The latest offering from Life is Strange devs Don't Nod, Jant is a traversal-focused adventure game where you play as a lone wanderer attempting to climb a gigantic tower. Refreshingly, the game has no combat to speak of and is focused almost entirely on players ascending the tower, with the game's intuitive tactile climbing mechanics turning the seemingly simple mission into an addictive puzzle in its own right. Rather than bog players down with reams of exposition, Jant is a pleasingly minimalist experience that actually has no dialogue at all. Instead, you're encouraged to learn about the world by just exploring it. With its low level of difficulty and emphasis on giving players a visually stunning meditative experience, aided by a gorgeous musical score from, and excuse my pronunciation, Guillaume Farran, Jant is the sort of transcendent title we desperately need more of. Number 1. The Invincible. One of the most visionary games of the entire year, the Invincible can't be easily dismissed as yet another walking simulator, given its jaw-droppingly rich atmosphere and prestigious source material. Stanislaw Lem's 1964 hard sci-fi novel of the same name. You'll spend most of the game's 5-hour playtime walking around the hostile planet Regis 3 as astrobiologist protagonist Yasna as you search for your missing crewmates. That said, developer Starwood Industries invest so deeply in their characters and game world that it's hard not to become intoxicated. While you could reductively call it Firewatch in space given the sparseness of its setting and the player's minimal direct interactions with other characters, the Invincible is still very much a haunting gem all on its own merits. Sadly, despite rock-solid critical reviews and a very positive Steam user rating from those who actually bought it, the game's launch window sales have been incredibly soft to date, suggesting a walking sim not on Xbox Game Pass releasing in such a crowded year didn't have much of a chance to break out. One can only hope that a game this good will find its audience in the coming months when there's a slightly less busier slate on the horizon.